That tennis match Sunday.
Oh. Rafa.
The best in sports when a champion at the end is filled with desperation at the end of his run. I can't honestly believe that the Miami Dolphins could shit even on Tom Brady's last day. Like that they could lose to him by blowout even on the last day, that the only way that the Dolphins can ever supplant Tom Brady is in the news cycle by having the story for our times on the day that he's retiring at the start of Black History Month.
It was a loss, but they kind of won in that regard, where they got, it was no more Brady. It was all about the Dolphins and Brian Flores suing them.
Okay, yeah, but
it's not the kind of PR you want,
the Dolphins,
but they dominated the headlines.
Yeah, they won the day. Tom Brady's road record career, I think, is like 8-10 at Miami. Another L.
Put it on the poll, please, Jessica. Billy's running late today. Who won more yesterday?
Well, when you frame it
Who
like
won the day more yesterday?
There you go.
Who won the day in the news cycle more yesterday? Tom Brady or the Dolphins? Okay, there is a lot of uproarious stuff here. We should say on the front end, there's a lot of stuff here that's also heartbreaking.
Yes.
I honestly, in seeing the text exchange between Bill Belichick and Brian Flores, I thought a number of things. One of them, what Stugotz wouldn't pay for just a live stream of Bill Belichick's text messages.
Oh, my God.
But to see an insight into their relationship, which appeared to be a cold one, because if you're really friends with somebody, you don't call them Bill in text you're sending back with respect. Like that was, like Brian Flores was thrilled to hear from Bill Belichick.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea, Stugotz, that he thought to ask like the black guy in the movie who's about to die and everyone can see he can die because these things are too good to be true. The idea that in that text he sees Belichick saying, congratulations, and he realizes this is too good to be true, was too easy. He realizes the Kingmaker is calling me, and he's like, wait a minute, did you mean to text Dayball?
Are you sure, Bill?
That's crazy. That is the craziest story of yesterday, even on a day when I learned that Brian Flores was being bribed by his owner to lose games.
I think that's the craziest part of yesterday. Quite honestly, I should say, too, my conceit is that the NFL and the country, for that matter, are systemically racist. So yesterday didn't seem all that revelatory.
We live in a racist country.
The Rooney Rule and those interviews always felt like shams to us.
Yep.
And now we have further proof, air quotes, because really all we got was a gossipy.
Oh, no, we don't have proof. Wait a minute. No, we do not have
in
proof.
The public.
No,
like,
but alleging racism and being able to prove it in court, I did not see in a 57-page lawsuit. I did not see proof. Now, they may get proof, and I'd like to see the movement, and I'm rooting for the movement, and I hope it gets a lot of other stories behind it, because this is a whistleblower who's willing to throw away his career on this martyrdom. But it is in some ways a funny whistleblower, and not only because he's not going to be advocating for Honduran rights when there aren't enough Honduran coaches in the NFL. This is a coach who was indeed very mean and wasn't exactly on the right side of Kenny Stills playing music and being protesting at practice. He was very much Patriot way then.
Yeah, he was keep your criticisms of Stephen Ross and politics private, Kenny Stills, and now he's a civil rights icon. Perhaps in the same conversation as Colin Kaepernick?
The reason I don't know what's going to happen there is I really don't know whether yesterday was a big noise of the moment or one of these Curt Flood things where a guy just said, I'm going to go on the principle, I'm going to go martyrdom. There's still jobs available. I'm going to make myself unemployable. This is the hill I'm going to die on. And furthermore, I really don't think he's going to settle. Like, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think this is a money play.
No, it's not. He's trying to make a point. He's trying to instigate change. He is. He's trying to point out what's going on in the NFL in a way that we can all see it. Not just talk about it, not just imagine it, in a way we can all see it. I think that's where he's headed.
I mean, the last time the NFL was sued for this, they did settle with Colin Kaepernick. So I would wait and see. I'm with Dan. I use proof in air quotes because if you turn to social media, they think a screen cap of a gossipy Bill Belichick is all the proof that they need. Look, we all knew this about the NFL. The NFL has navigated this quite swimmingly. The sport seemingly is bigger than it's ever been in this country.
They haven't navigated it swimmingly. They have continued to do record numbers, and they are the content king, and they are the most giant entertainment thing we've ever had in this country. And I'm not even sure that bad public relations are bad public relations, because now they're in the conversation for 2 weeks headed up to the big game. Everyone will be talking about this, and they don't necessarily have to do anything about it yet until, Mike, you get a movement behind somebody who has the courage to do what Brian Flores just did. There are not many who throw away. That guy's been trying to coach for his entire life. He got the opportunity through the Belichick tree, and he succeeded more than most because Belichick has sprinkled success everywhere, even though he doesn't know how to use technology because he's older than Greg Cody.
Yeah. Well, what I actually think might happen here, and Charles Robinson alluded to it, is like, okay, you don't think a gossipy Bill Belichick text message is proof? Well, I've got proof. And this may open the door. We saw with the Me Too movement how one person's bravery led to two people's bravery, and then it became this sweeping movement.
You might get a class action lawsuit that feels like the concussion settlement and isn't what they just did with Cully in Houston, where they gave him $22 million of reparations with, look, we know you're a career lifer of 66-year-old who has never had a coordinator job and has never been somebody who has been in charge, but please clean up this mess for a year. We'll give you a 3-year contract and you'll get all $22 million. You can get something here where so many coaches join because this stuff has been so obvious for so long that the royal family of football, the Pittsburgh Steelers, had to install a rule that no one pays any attention to because this has been a problem for long before now. I'm with Mike, though, on the idea that I think yesterday's bigger story, I mean, I know which one makes the noise, but the bigger story that an owner, that's the stuff out of Major League, the movie Major League, that an owner is trying to bribe his coach to lose games, and he's cheap about it.
He was trying to get Joe Burrow, though. I mean,
well, yeah, I do kind of laugh that in part Stephen Ross made lose this team. At least that's what people are saying, because he wanted Tom Brady and Joe Burrow.
Yeah,
I said swimmingly because the NFL has dealt with people like you and other talking heads calling it systemically racist for years. The NFL dealt with a lawsuit from Colin Kaepernick alleging racism and settled it, and is still putting up record numbers. What the NFL hasn't really dealt with is proof of tanking. It's a concept. We kind of see it on the television when we see like practice squad quarterbacks starting games, but paying allegedly $100,000.
Trying to. It was rejected, though.
Trying to, right.
Well,
because he's a principled man.
Yeah.
He is.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, the guy that is actively, according to leaked reports, tampering with Deshaun Watson to this day, didn't want to be on a yacht near a former player. Some of this stuff asks you to suspend a lot of disbelief, but you welcome gambling into the game, Stugotz. And if you have an owner offering cash rewards for losing
it's crazy.
games,
It's
you
crazy.
throw the integrity of the game in the trash.
Right.
Whitty has been cutting up CBS Sound because Brian Flores is making the rounds, and we will have the partner from the law firm representing Brian Flores later in the show.
Are some Dolphin fans, I say some Dolphin fans going to be upset with Brian Flores and applaud Stephen Ross because Ross was willing to lose to get Joe Burrow?
And was trying to get Tom Brady. And by the way, we would not have had yesterday feel like yesterday if Brady had been with the Dolphins. The end of his career would have been sad and awful. I can't believe that the most surprising thing about all of that was that Brady would take a meeting with any of these people.
Michigan guy, though.
And I don't know. I don't know. Tom Brady was terrific over the last 2 years. And a lot of people pointed out to me, I got into a lot of debates on social media. It's like, why would Brian Flores accept this plan of tanking when, because he's a black head coach, his record will just be held against him? Like, it's impossible to know exactly what this team would look like if they had, say, Joe Burrow. But I have very recent evidence to suggest Miami Dolphins might have been a Joe Burrow away because he's in the Super Bowl right now.
Well,
Yep.
one of the greatest talents that they've swallowed the last 20 years. Parcells and Saban failed here. Losers.
Mm-hmm.
The
Every coach has been a loser here.
Okay,
I mean,
but I'm just saying that's, in terms of regard, they can swallow anybody. This organization over the last 20 years, much of it owned by Stephen Ross, who hasn't paid taxes on anything in this country in a really long time. Stephen Ross has run this organization, once the winningest in sports, right into the ground. Don Shula recently passed away, and Stephen Ross has used all the collateral. He has buried this team in shame. It is only relevant when he is doing big, dumb things like assigning a task force because they've got a bullying scandal, and I still haven't gotten the first report from the task force.
Mike, they were 10-6 a season ago. You don't think if they have Tom Brady, perhaps they're in the AFC Championship game?
The last two Dolphins teams very much needed an upgrade at quarterback, and if they had Tom Brady or Joe Burrow, they're at the very least a playoff team.
We will get to that, though, Mike, because I can't be surprised at all that Stugotz wants to
do
turn
the sports radio thing?
today into
imagine that.
Brady retired yesterday, and he still wants to do the hypotheticals.
I mean, there's finally an owner who's doing what I've asked an owner to do: tank a season. I mean,
trying. He was
4 games against the Patriots.
Allegedly.
He was unsuccessful in trying allegedly to do it because his coach wouldn't take what I believe to be bribes that are very cheap for what he was asking.
Too much time has gone without me making once again the conceit that the NFL and the country is systemically racist. So let me say that. Stephen Ross invested in Action Network in 2019. The NFL has formal partnerships with DraftKings and all sorts of gambling apps and is taking all sorts of gambling dollars. And we saw this over the course of the year where they would just sweep bad officiating under the rug and think we're operating in the world where gambling is once again in the shadows, sort of like tough shit, something kind of screwy happened. Now you have an owner allegedly offering $100,000 cash rewards for losing. That is a Pete Rose level scandal.
Flabbergasting and amazing to me that it gets drowned out today by the other stuff, even though I understand it. We all understand it. The big noise of the moment is, wait a minute, successful coach is now suing and starting a sports historic leadership march toward making this an echoing thing that isn't just loud noise of the moment. Hey, George Floyd died, and the machine is trying to get back to where it was, where all the guys being hired are white dudes, and Dayball's the next genius, and Belichick's had so many riches that he can't even tell apart the Bryants on his phone, even though they're very different human beings.
That could happen to anyone, Dan.
It really could. It really could. It has happened to Stugotz.
It did happen to me. I was texting. I meant to text Abby. She told me to get a foot massage, and I finally went to get one in New York City, and I texted her what was supposed to be for her, hey, you were right. Foot massage, better than sex. I sent it to Alden Smith.
I sent Chris Cody last night my thoughts on the Colombia World Cup qualifying match.
Oh.
I meant to send it to my family.
It happens.
You didn't send them to me?
Do you want my thoughts on Colombia's
What
World
are
Cup
those?
qualifying?
Share with all of us if you
It's
will.
gone awry.
Oh.
They've not scored a goal in like 8 games.
It's too bad.
In 8th grade, I texted a girl and I said that she was the spawn of Satan, and I accidentally sent it to her.
She was texting in 8th grade.
Haven't made that mistake since.
Whittingham, what were your thoughts about the Dolphins? And you've heard the sound. I have not heard the sound from Flores yet. A freedom fighter that I'm not certain. This has to have been in play before he was so publicly smeared. But the Dolphins smearing him this way must have hurt so much, must have been so personal to see himself dragged like that over the last 2 weeks, that if he had any doubt about a lawsuit, he's rushing to it really early. He could have waited for 3 more jobs. He's taking his opening now because he and his attorneys know they can use the big noise, know they could use it right before the Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
Did it on Brady's big day, right after the conference championships games. This kind of stuff, you don't end up on CBS This Morning without some planning involved. It's not like it just happened from one moment to the next. But when we have the attorney on, I'd be super curious to know how hurt his client is. Because if he wasn't angry black man before that smear campaign, I bet you sure as shit was after that smear campaign, because that had to sting to see the organization drag you like that publicly and not be able to retort.
To me, the thing that I took away from listening to the interview was that it might not have been the smear campaign. I really think it's what happened with the Giants.
Same.
And the fact
Yes.
that he got a text from Bill Belichick saying, "Congrats on the job," realized it wasn't him, and he's walking into a sham interview. And for a guy who has achieved what he has achieved, as turning around a terrible franchise where the owner was allegedly paying to try and get him to lose games, to then turning them into a winning team for 2 straight seasons, he's done a job that merits him being hired somewhere else. And then to basically realize that you're walking into an interview that you are not going to participate in. I heard your conversation yesterday with Howard Bryan where he's talking about other such candidates like Willie Randolph in baseball who have done that. That it's humiliating.
It
and
is.
I think those are the moments where Brian Flores goes, we have to do something about this.
Can you just imagine whether it's angry or hurt? I just want you to be Brian Flores for a moment. I don't mean to do the Matthew McConaughey scene where I'm asking you
Should I close my eyes?
to imagine that he's white, but I just want you to imagine the hurt on Brian Flores when the champion and mentor that he respects so much that he's still like texting him, "Thanks, Bill," by name and using his name in the text because he wants to clearly be respectful. And he was you can almost see the thrill of Bill Belichick knows something I don't. He knows the Giants' job is mine. That's a great job. Thank you, Bill, my mentor. And then he realizes it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And then it becomes hysterical because Belichick just has to figure out on his phone how to leave dots there until all this is solved itself. Like once he's made that mistake, he copped to it immediately, but he needs to not ever answer that text.
But Chris is right. That exchange started days before they announced Brian Dable as coach.
Well,
and Flores went in for another interview, and Belichick's already telling him you're not getting the job.
But this is where Flores has torched, I'm guessing, maybe the relationship with Belichick and torched the relationships throughout the league because he's putting out there for everyone to see not just buffoonery from champion Bill Belichick, Patriot way, everything stays in-house and private, but the hurt is so profound that it's coming from the guy who gave him his job.
Yes.
It's so profound that he's just like, oh, never mind, let me get my lawyers. I need to get my lawyers because now what's going to happen is Bill Belichick's going to get deposed. Like Bill Belichick is going to have to talk about things in front of people that he doesn't want to talk about. And Brian Flores just did that to him and did it to him because he's the victim of what the system and what Belichick, the hurt that morphed into.
And in the interview, the attorney says that they contacted CBS about doing this last week, that this has been in the works. So it seems very much like that text exchange happened and Brian Flores is like, all right, I'm doing something about this straight away. And then there is the gathering of the evidence and the writing of this 58-page lawsuit that includes all these incredible accusations.
They're incredible accusations. I know a lot of people are looking at it and saying right now, well, this is not proof. This is not proof of racism. It's the spark that starts the fuse is one. B, this is just what they've gathered in the last couple of weeks to throw together some paperwork that they could get out there before the Super Bowl to get this maximum attention. That they will now go through discovery and some of the things. They will go and start gathering proof, and they will have the momentum of a media.
And gathering coaches, probably.
They will have the momentum of a media and a climate where this can morph into power if enough people are assembled. This can become a movement if enough people have had their dignity hurt that way and have the receipts on it, can prove that this is a class action suit that will make the NFL want to go away like the concussion settlements. Stugotz, just $725 million, please take that. Reparations. Can we get on with our league now?
The amazing thing to me is that Brian Flores, it would appear, was gathering evidence or kind of writing these things down over the course of the last 3 years so that when this, or if this happened, he had this. But to me, the thing that most stands out about this lawsuit is it's the quiet part out loud. All of it, right? From the sham interviews to the tanking in a real way, which I wasn't terribly surprised by, just because if you go back and look at that season, like they signaled with their roster, with the amount of dead money they had, the amount of active money they had on the field, with the players they're throwing out there, they're not trying to win. And they
won anyway.
Right. Well, they won 5 games, which is more than anyone expected. But it's the logical next step.
Too many games to get
for the
Burrow.
owner to then say, "Well, do you mind not beating Cleveland on the road? That'd be great."
I mean,
It's not that you don't mind. Can you mind? It's the $100,000. If
Yeah.
the answer was no, and then money got thrown in.
I gotta feel like that's easy to prove, and I don't think that there's really anything to this without the Giants component to all of this. And I think that text string is going to be very difficult to prove in a court of law that it was anything more than just Bill Belichick gossiping with a couple of Giants friends. It's
but
all
but
fantastic.
he will depose. He'll be deposed, and
Well,
he'll have to answer how he
he
knew
may.
to congratulate.
He may be deposed unless Bill Belichick applies pressure of his own. We'll find out how much power.
Yeah,
he
but
has
Mike,
to
it's
make
how'd you
sure that
know when
this
you-
goes away.
It's how'd you know. It's when you know. It's why did the Giants ask Brian Flores to come back in for a sham interview? I mean, that's the stuff.
Yeah, I think that that's really the story. Like the Dolphin stuff in particular is still he said. And a lot of people, including myself, did the thing where we saw all those leaks, the alleged smear campaign, and we're like, well, that's coming from Ross. Did some poking around. No, it didn't all come from Ross. It flatly didn't. Brian Flores, if you read those reports, it's actually very easy to deduce where a lot of these leaks came from. Brian Flores was allegedly mean to his staff and didn't talk to his staff for weeks. You think that's coming from Ross, or do you think that's coming from Brian Flores' staff? Brian Flores didn't actually rebut any of the things in those leaks. He can be both things.
That's the thing. He doesn't have to be a pure freedom fighter. These things are always imperfect, right? The martyrs are rarely the perfect messengers. It just doesn't happen that way. We can turn these people into symbols and argue over the sides on just about anything. But Brian Flores is a pretty good martyr, coming from the Belichick tree, having had success and looking around, being hurt and angry, because he feels like he can prove that what he just endured was racist. Maybe he can, maybe he can't. The fact that he's doing it, willing to do it, make the loud noise, be the martyr. You can yell and scream, he's doing it for money. It's not principle. He's not a good freedom fighter. He was wrong side of Kenny Stills. Doesn't matter. He is now at the forefront of having made a choice that is principled. You can attack it from any side you want to attack it. The choice is a principled one. He was hurt. He was angry. I'm imagining, we'll hear him in his own voice here, by everything that's happened that's been embarrassing the last few weeks. A man who got success from an owner who was paying him to lose and overachieve there. And then allegedly, and then his record, everyone's holding that up now, 24-25, impacted by that first year, which he made them 5-11. They didn't have any right to be 5-11. The next 2 years, they overachieve but don't make the playoffs in a league where everybody makes the playoffs and everything's been fast forwarded. You got to do it in 3 years or get out of here.
If they had Burrow, they'd be in the playoffs.
Or Brady.
Yeah, Super Bowl.
But you're talking about Brian Flores as an individual and how he might be a flawed person to bring this case forward. But it's also worth pointing out that he is attempting to start a class action lawsuit. He is attempting to gather other former NFL head coaches, other coaches who have attempted to interview for head coaching positions, and have several people. So it's not just about the character or the background of one person. It's about a group of people who have had racism against them. And so the idea that, it's about what Brian Flores is specifically, he's trying to gather other people. Now, it'd be curious to see if other people are going to kind of light their careers on fire in order to join them.
I don't need the result, though, to tell you that what he's done is already historically brave. I don't need, go ahead, you'll go to court, you'll do everything else, you'll argue about all the details, what he said, what he meant, what his motives are. What I'm telling you is that this is a historically echoing sound for me, no matter where the result ends up, because there's plenty in the system to make the result go away, Stugotz. There's plenty of money. The machine he's going up against He's got an army of Jim Caldwells or Lovie Smiths. We don't know the stories they got, but right now they're all being brought together.
Yeah, does this open the portal to Jim Caldwell being like, well,
Of
you want
course it
stories?
does. No, of course it opens the portal to that.
But I applaud, and we should all applaud, and I think everyone is, or most people are, applaud Brian Flores for doing this because, Dan, he's like Jim Caldwell would not take certain interviews because he was like, hey, it's a token interview. I'm not doing it. It's embarrassing, so I'm not going to do it. And Brian Flores just went through what so many black head coaches have gone through before, and rather than just let it go by, he's saying, no, stop right here. I'm going to shine some light on it.
Well, it's not just shining some light. He's torched his career in the name of the principle. It's not just shining the light.
I know.
And it's not all pretty, right? Some of this stuff feels gratuitous. John Elway showed up hungover to my meeting and therefore didn't take me seriously. What is really the merit of this? This is hearsay. This is you thinking he looks hungover, but he's going to continue dragging people into this. It's a class action lawsuit. I imagine a lot of people have stories similar to this guy acted in an embarrassing fashion. I'm going to air all that dirty laundry. And regardless of whether or not I can prove racism, you're not going to like this look that goes out there.
I was kind of laughing at the Broncos' response. Meeting started 7:30 a.m. sharp.
The spectrum, though, the spectrum on all of it is amazing. Like drunk John Elway combined with this league enduring lawsuits on the spectrum from Flores and the bigot John Gruden in the same season.
Man.
They can't figure out which side they're on. They're just stencil end racism in the end zone and maybe that'll make it go away. Like it's just they're being assaulted by
the Super Bowl.
by black people, Hondurans, and the bigoted Klan from every side. They're being sued.
The job went to Vic Fangio, a white man.
Thanks.
Here's Brian Flores in his own words on CBS Mornings discussing potentially sacrificing his career.
I let both the teams know that, we're gonna file, but look, I love coaching. I'm gifted to coach. I know that. And the relationships I've built with players, coaches, support staff, I'm gifted to coach, and I love coaching, and I want to coach. But this is bigger than coaching. Of course. This is much bigger than coaching.
He goes on to make comparisons to the NFL being run like a plantation.
I think we didn't have to file a lawsuit for the world to know that there's a problem from a hiring standpoint in regards to minority coaches in the National Football League. The numbers speak for themselves. Right. We filed the lawsuit so that we could create some change, and that's important to me. I think we're at a fork in the road right now. We're either going to keep it the way it is, or we're going to go in another direction and actually make some real change where we're actually changing the hearts and minds of those who make decisions to hire head coaches, executives, etc.
Courtesy CBS.
If you go back through the history of this, because I didn't hear plantation, that's a loaded word, and it'll get people to start a fight and not hear anything after that. And they don't care.
It's in the lawsuit.
They don't care that James Baldwin said a highly compensated slave is still a slave. Like, they don't want to hear it. The plantation is one that is going to stop the conversation before it starts. But allow me to explain for a second what's happening there, no matter how much money these people are making working on, quote unquote, this plantation. If you want to think about systemic racism in this country and all the strides that black people had to make with this country being free labor, being the coal furnace this country's commerce was built on, the free labor of slavery, all the climbing that has had to be done after that has been granted reluctantly by white power, the climbing of those people into powerful spaces. It has been white power in charge for a long time, and white power protects white power. This is not me saying that this is a country filled with Klansmen. It's just telling you that white power tends to hire, just make it anywhere you want to make it, tends to hire people who look like them, think like them, similar sensibilities. And when you look at the entire commerce of the NFL, the way the whole thing ends up working, there's only so powerful the black player or coach can be, because, Stugotz, the way the structure is set up in a conservative league that blackballs Colin Kaepernick, all the power at the top is white, and you guys want Goodell to do something, and he works for them. So what? He can't even topple Daniel Snyder, who's an embarrassment to all the others. All the other white guys in that club are protected by the guy they pay $32 million a year to just be a janitor for them. He is a $32 million janitor that absorbs everything. He does not have any ownership over them. They have the ownership over him. He works for them. And all the power at the very top, Stugotz, gets Colin Kaepernick out of the league, and then from one day to the next, Patrick Mahomes, black player, labor, highly compensated, labor, says something, truth to power. The next day, they send out their janitor, and Goodell's like, we were wrong, never mind, we were wrong, sorry, we were wrong. The next day. That's not the owner saying they're wrong. Jerry Jones is still dancing around out there with the flag. Jerry Jones, who had to be held back from drafting Johnny Manziel on draft day, like dragged by the arm, because the people in charge of this, as you're noticing with Stephen Ross, not actually as smart as you think they are. Some of them are kind of baboons who haven't paid taxes for 15 years and got really rich, and you think they're smart because they're rich, and all they are is really rich.
This is from the complaint. It says, in certain critical ways, the NFL is racially segregated and is managed much like a plantation. Its 32 owners, none of whom are black, profit substantially from the labor of NFL players, 70% of whom are black. The owners watch the games from atop NFL stadiums in their luxury boxes, while their majority black workforce puts their bodies on the line every Sunday, taking vicious hits and suffering debilitating injuries to their bodies and their brains, while the NFL, and their owners reap billions of dollars. It's a fine.
You okay?
Yeah. I mean, we kind of always said this, right? We kind of always knew it while watching it.
No, but it's different. Hold on a second. It's different saying it and all of a sudden getting power, movement, and lawyers behind. The argument we're taking to court is that this is all a plantation. We're taking the argument to court that it's the same. It's Stugotz. As soon as the players in college football started asking for the money and the power, Stugotz, the entire system ended up changing. As soon as all the people up top went and grabbed at the money in college football. Now the players are grabbing for the power, the coaches are grabbing for the power. And what do you think the people at the top of that are going to do? They're going to use Roger Goodell to make sure that nobody gets near the power. They control the club. Who gets in it? Michael Jordan has gotten as high as any of them. You think he's got power? Because the power is to hire people and make sure that you're spreading the league with the Belichick seed that's all over the place. Make sure you're hiring so many people that some of them are going to have success. Pull them up. But Michael Jordan is one of how many? And he's dealing. He's one. But his peer is Donald Sterling.
Right.
Look at what it takes for Michael Jordan to get there, and look at what Donald Sterling, slumlord, clown, racist. They're of equal power, but there can be 30 Sterlings and one Jordan. Shad Khan, right? Is he the only minority owner, or is there another minority owner in the NFL?
Kim Pagula owns part of the Buffalo Bills. She's Asian American.
Yeah. And they're not all white guys. Benson family.
But none of them are black.
No, I understand.
70% of the players are black.
That's why they said 0 black owners. I know that there's conversation about the Denver franchise possibly being the first one to open that what seems like a forbidden door, and there's not equal representation for the people on the field to that point. There's no one in the most powerful positions that reflects what the league truly is.
Isn't it insane that I couldn't have seen this coming in terms of a class action lawsuit, but it did seem like this issue was coming to a head when we began the coaching cycle with one active NFL head coach that was black, and that's Mike Tomlin. And that none of the teams that have hired coaches since did, even for the sake of optics, not even because they're hiring good coaches, didn't hire black men, and for the most part have picked white offensive geniuses, because black guys rarely get to be the offensive genius. It's only Byron Leftwich in this cycle that's going to get anywhere near that label. It's all the white guys who get to be, to Chris Cody's point, the white guys with the glasses that are the ones that are being hired right now. It's insane.
Why is this surprising to you?
Because the NFL, as Dan has pointed out many times, times as end racism in their end zone. We know that this issue, you begin the coaching cycle with one active black NFL head coach, and nobody wanted to remedy that problem.
And the only one is the guy who's never had a losing season is the other thing. And Stugotz, it's not, this is how it happens. It's how it's happened for a long time. Every club sort of wants to do it, believes in the idea of it sort of, as long as somebody else is the one doing it, as long as somebody else is the one leading on this. The optics of this, Stugotz, just...
Dan, I know it's terrible, but it's been the optics forever in the NFL, and
right.
Brian Flores is saying no more.
Okay,
I'm trying to change it.
But what I would say to you, though...
Like, that shouldn't be surprising that a bunch of teams needed a head coach, and they none of them hired a black head coach.
You are allowed...
At this stage of the NFL in 2022, we're surprised by that, and Flores is saying, no, I want to change it, and I'm going to change it now.
You're allowed to be totally unsurprised because you know everything that's coming as somebody hires, lawyers to do a lawsuit.
They have a track record in the NFL.
I know, but you're allowed to be unsurprised by it. I'm imploring you to not be so unsurprised by it that you're numb to it. That you argue on behalf of, well, this isn't surprising, it's just the way it is.
No.
And you don't put any flame behind the voice, Stugotz, of if you're not going to be surprised and shocked by this, then be hurt or angry, and also laugh at the buffoonery of the incompetence of the billionaires in it. Because the pandemic has sped up everything. Everything. Billionaires are wealthier than they've ever been. The wealth gap is larger than it has ever been. And one of the things that it sped up is, oh, look, after George Floyd, they're going to go right back to the way it was. One coach, maybe somebody else gets hired, but the machine is going to get right back to where it was, and it's going to take a lawsuit by one guy who's clearly qualified enough to do at least not sham interviews, and that's what's required to move the needle as the machine tries to get back into the space that it was before George Floyd.
But saying I'm not hurt by it or angered by it or other fans aren't hurt or angered by it, that's not fair, Dan.
I'm not saying that to you, buddy. I'm saying the moment you give voice to being unsurprised by this, you're a little bit number to it. It should still be
Dan.
surprising to you that a coach is being bribed $100,000 by his owner, and that owner might not be somebody who's quite as enlightened as you would like him to be when making these kinds of hires.
But I'm just saying they were all numb to it. I'm sorry, because if Brian Flores didn't do what he did, this whole cycle would have went by. They would have hired any black coaches, and we all would have made the joke about the Rooney Rule. And Brian Flores said, no, not joking anymore. What can I do? What can you do? What can Mike do? What can Chris do? We can't do anything. He can do something.
No, but salute the bravery in it, because what's going to happen?
I am.
But Stugotz, what's going to happen at these microphones is this man's going to get torn apart. He's going to get torn up. You think there was a smear campaign before? Wait till he becomes a symbol for what? Plantation. What? You say you're arguing in court that these millions of dollars that these people make is a plantation? When he becomes a symbol for that, do you know what he's welcoming into his life in this America? Don't be unsurprised by it because it makes you numb to it. Like, I'm not saying you, I'm saying all of you. Don't keep being surprised by it because it's hugely offensive. Even if this isn't the perfect case, okay? Even if this isn't just he can prove racism and we're going to look at him like we look at Martin Luther King in 2022. Not back then. If he's perfect, even if he's perfect, people are going to argue about this. Notice the bravery of the moment, because the man just set fire to his career, and he did it with jobs open, and he did it on principle, and he also took out possibly, or threatened, I imagine, a relationship with Bill Belichick, his mentor. None of this can be easy for him. What he is doing is brave, even if you argue on your side of it, this isn't racist, that isn't racist, I don't believe that there's racism here.
This is about forcing the issue, because I actually genuinely believe the NFL knows it has a problem, and the NFL is doing a lot to try to address that problem. While there's only one black head coach, two minority head coaches with Ron Rivera in Washington, we did just see a GM cycle where two black GMs were hired. We saw the Cleveland Browns receive a third-round draft pick because a minority was hired away from their franchise to run the Minnesota Vikings. There have to be people within those league offices that are dedicating their professional lives to eradicating this and instituting rewards like hey, hire more minority
It's hard to
candidates.
do, though.
And you could get something like a 3rd-round draft pick.
Which
and
is sad in and of itself. The fact that you
Right.
have
Correct.
to offer 3rd-round draft
Right.
picks.
Little
But
bribes.
it is-
little bribes.
But it is progress.
Little bribes. Please don't be racist.
But ultimately,
Burrow.
all that work and all these 3rd-round picks and all these black GMs getting hired, all of it still gets undone because you can't tell one owner of 32 franchises who to hire. Because ultimately, they'll come away with the candidate they feel fits best. And there could be loads of reasons for that, potentially even some racist ones.
Some not racist. Many not racist.
I would even venture to say most of the time it's not racist. Okay? At least I'd like to believe.
Grant them that.
I'd like to believe most of the time it's not racist.
90% of the time, let's argue on behalf of the utopian society where it's not racist.
But
Brian Flores is coming for the 10% where it is.
I envision a room at
He's
owners'
coming for the
meetings.
Giants.
I envision a room at owners' meetings of everyone nodding along, acknowledging, yes, there is a problem. Someone needs to do something about this. You do it.
It's just I really believe that the systemic issue here is that every team now wants a partner for their quarterback, or the guy who's going to develop their quarterback, or the offensive genius. And I really believe that is so rarely viewed within the NFL as the black guy. The black guy who has risen in coaching is most often on the defensive side of the football.
Even when it's Bieniemy and it's the Chiefs. Even when it's the coordinator
job,
for
right?
an innovative.
Even when it's not even an offensive guy. Oh, you breathe the same air as Sean McVay. We'll position you as an offensive genius, Brandon Staley, even though you're a defensive guy.
And so all of these guys that are being hired right now is Brian Daboll. Can you turn Daniel Jones into Josh Allen? No. Nathaniel Hackett. Can you fix the Broncos quarterbacking situation?
As incidentally, in college sports where these Stugotz, these coaches are going to start populating all of these jobs in college football too, when everyone realizes you could pay the coordinators $1 million and $2 million, especially if Lincoln Riley can, as he has, just took Oklahoma's quarterback. He took Lincoln Riley. That I don't know if that was a package deal that was set up before that, but it ends up being USC didn't just get Oklahoma's coach, they got Oklahoma's quarterback. So all this professionalism is now coming to the college sports as well. All this money is going to flood in all over the place in leadership. And who do you think's going to grab it? It's going to be a whole lot of white people.
Well, it's all the guys who are known for having offensive systems, right? Chip Kelly, Mike Shanahan, Sean McVay. All of these guys are white. And we were trying to come up with names back here. It's Byron Leftwich and it's Eric Bieniemy. Those are the two black offensive guys who are kind of being thrown around in this cycle. Everyone wants a guy for their quarterback, and teams do not trust that black people can do that job, it would appear.
Since Al Campanis was on Nightline and gave voice to it, Dodgers general manager, team of Jackie Robinson, blacks don't have the necessities to do the job that I do. Since back then, we've been talking about this, and that's been the team of Jackie Robinson. The general manager got fired 2 days later because he said it out loud. They don't have the necessities. We need the black bodies. We need the white minds. The black bodies need to be led. Like, that's what's going to court. He's going into court with plantation, and it's going to start a whole lot of fights. And Stugotz, I don't want to be unfair to you, so forgive me, because when I say don't be unsurprised by this, it's because the details of this out in the light require disinfectant. Even if you can argue about every morsel of was he right or was he not right, he just torched something he cares about greatly in the name of I was hurt and angry enough by what just happened to me that it fell a hell of a lot like racism I can prove.
And I'm going to prove it.
But racism I can prove in court, I don't know if he's going to prove it, Stugotz.
I'm going to try to prove it.
I'm just telling you that it doesn't matter to me if he does prove it or not. He's made the statement today that will stay with me no matter what happens from here. I'm not going to play the result on this one. He's telling you I want to be the leader on I just felt racism and I think I could prove it in court.
And the class action nature of this lawsuit is he actually doesn't have to prove it, but someone else can. And someone else may step forward. And I got to believe because of American history. Someone else has a lot out there to further this argument.
I mean, the arguments are anecdotal. I've heard them, right? That Leslie Frazier was asked in an interview on a questionnaire if he was willing to work on Sundays. Like, I don't know if that's proof of anything, but I'm eager for the disclosure of what all these guys are going to tell now that Brian Flores has given them the courage. Stugotz, so many of these guys are going to have the opportunity to stand behind a pioneer and a leader on this, whether you like the messenger or not.
I check no on working on Sundays.
I know it was a stunner to get you in here last week, but this is happening. When you say, Mike, the diversity, that they might be committed to diversity, I don't actually want to just say bullshit to that, even though the results of that suggest bullshit. I do believe that they're doing all sorts of things trying, but this is how hard it is to move the machine, and we're all learning about some of this. Like the new Jackass movie has a whole lot of minorities in it, and you can't help but notice, oh, wait a minute, those were all white dudes, and I thought the doing dumb shit to injure yourself was the exclusive domain of white dudes, but no, they got to diversify that, and they've got to do something in 2022 that shows me, holy shit, Jackass was white, and I didn't even realize it.
Did you watch the Jackass movie? Because that would be like the most surprising thing of today.
With no sound?
I have seen trailers with no sound. Isn't Johnny Knoxville coming on with us?
He was supposed to, Dan. He had to cancel.
Oh, boy.
And a big Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
Did you also laugh at the Jackass trailer where all these people were throwing caution to the wind and doing all sorts of reckless stunts whilst wearing surgical masks?
What else was funny about this lawsuit? Billy, yeah, I haven't heard from you. And Roy, you've been editing the whole time, and that's a blind spot for the show because it's not that I'm guessing it's not that he doesn't have anything to say, but he has been editing the entire time. Billy, Roy, this is your local team. We rarely have a local story of the size that it knocks Tom Brady out of a news cycle. So what do you got? What were your observations here?
From the first day of the firing, I knew something was up, and now there's proof. And he clearly has, like Mike said, this is going to be a class action lawsuit. He doesn't even have to prove it. Like, there's going to be people coming forward with proof that the NFL is being run by a plantation, like a plantation. Like, their hiring practices need to change, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going to happen. Like, I'm excited, actually.
The discovery on this, I think we're going to get discovery here that I was hoping for in the Gruden lawsuit, Stugotz, that I don't think we're going to get in the Gruden lawsuit. Billy, what were you amused? Was there anything amusing that you saw in the Dolphins' incompetence?
What about this would have been amusing, Dan? What part would you have been laughing at yesterday?
The Dolphins' incompetence.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think some of the bigger accusations aren't race related and are going to have big ramifications too. Like if you're playing or you're trying to pay someone to lose on purpose, like that's not a racial thing. You're just trying to pay a coach to lose. If you're trying to pay or you're trying to get him to collude with an active player from another team, like that's not race related, and that's going to have big ramifications too.
But I just want the funny of a Dolphin owner
just to laugh at racism,
failing to successfully bribe his coach. And I don't want you to laugh at racism, but I do want you to laugh at the idea of how would you have handled realizing on your phone as Brian Flores is texting you back that you've texted the wrong Brian. You don't think there's funny there?
They haven't spoken since. He went on CNN today, and he said that he didn't tell Bill Belichick that he was including that in the lawsuit, pictures of that, and he hasn't spoken to him since.
I'm asking you.
I think he stopped caring there.
I'm asking
Brian Flores.
I'm asking Billy Gill the question of you've made the mistake. You're Bill Belichick. You have confused Brian Daboll and Brian Flores. You have texted Brian Flores, congratulations, when you meant to text Brian Daboll, and he realizes that this is all too easy. I've gotten this job too easy, and my mentor is texting me, this is all too easy. I can't believe that he knew to ask that question. It's stunning to me.
Well, it was days later. He probably saw the news that he wasn't getting the job. He's like, is it a wrong Brian situation?
And also, like, he hasn't talked to the Giants yet.
By the way,
And so he's like, wait a second, what? I'm getting the job. I haven't even talked to them yet.
I was that good with the Dolphins?
They all have agents that like blabber to one another also. And this entire segment is just Dan trying to get us to stencil laugh at racism in the end zone of our show.
this whole mixing up of the first name things happens all the time. I've been getting tagged in local Miami politics stuff all the time now because people think that I'm Billy Corbin or that I'm the one that's angry yelling at clouds. So the wrong Billy, the wrong Brian thing, I could see it happening.
How would you've answered 70 questions that aren't the one I'm
I don't
asking
understand
you.
what you want the answer to be.
What do you want him to say,
I
Dan?
am saying that you are Bill Belichick. You've just realized as Brian Flores is texting you back that you erroneously congratulated the wrong person, and he's asking you, did you mean to text Dayball? Are you answering it honestly the way Belichick did? Are you leaving it unanswered? Are you saying something else? What are you doing in that situation?
I mean, I'd probably throw my phone into a volcano. Jemele, what'd you think of those helmets?
I have no opinion. You know, I can't tell you conversations that ultimately, this is no disrespect to you fine ladies and gentlemen here. Any talk about helmets or uniforms, like, I don't give a damn about those. Like, people get so obsessed with these things, and it's like, I don't care. They're, at the end of the day, they're clothes, and it's a covering. Like,
Yeah, but as a 49ers fan, you have some of the best uniforms in the league, though.
Right, she's spoiled, Roy. You're right. You're right.
is that what it is? That's why I have this privileged attitude about uniforms. I mean, I
Absolutely.
used to love the gold 49ers jackets. Like, they were amazing. And
the Danny
you know,
Tanners.
yeah, yes. Yeah, exactly. But generally speaking, people get so consumed with uniforms that that's always a conversation where I'm just like, I'm checking out. But I was listening to you guys, of course.
No, but it's funny that you say that because I've been trying to engage Black and Gold, Billy and Roy back there on the topic of the day for the entirety of the show, and I didn't get the passion from them on that.
That's the conversation we check out on.
That
Dan.
I get on uniforms. Like, the two of them are chatterboxes on uniforms, but I try to get them involved in the other conversation. They don't want to do it.
Yeah, big news. The Commanders. Yeah, absolute big news. Biggest news of the day, actually.
What a bad day for that.
Okay, just all of it, Jemele. I don't want to typecast you as come on here and talk Brian Flores. Yesterday was a wildly appalling and funny and heartbreaking and awful day for the NFL. And at the beginning of it, it starts with Tom Brady. So as you're
Not
watching,
thanking the Patriots.
not thanking the Patriots, but Stugotz says he's unsurprised, and you're allowed to be unsurprised because we've all been watching it for 30 years, but you can't be numb to what Brian Flores just did, Jemele.
No, I mean, that's clearly the biggest news. And I know Tom Brady was thinking, really, I picked a really bad day to announce that I was retiring. And by the way, Dan, I'm totally comfortable being your Black friend for the show. Like, it's okay. In addition to Roy, like, it's fine.
I hate it. I'm
okay being tokenized. It's okay. But no, I mean, clearly Brian Flores, you know, this is the reckoning that the NFL has deserved for a long time. And many observations there. Number one, shout out to dropping this right on the first day of Black History Month.
It's unbelievable.
Harriet Tubman would be proud. Like, do it.
Unbelievable.
Exactly. So all of us who left cookies out for the spirit of Harriet Tubman, we're like, see, the ancestors rewarded us. So there's that part of it. And of course, what was so just ultimately hilarious to me is that the NFL releases this statement, like, very quickly denying the allegations as if they've done any kind of investigation. And they say his claims are without merit. Then why do you have a Rooney Rule? Like, it's just so obvious. If there was no problem with hiring Black coaches, if there was no problem with Black representation in front offices, you wouldn't need to discipline teams for not interviewing minority candidates. So there's very clearly a problem. We know what it is. You have an institutionally racist league, and it's shown up at your front door. So, I applaud Brian Flores for doing when you talk to many coaches, Black coaches in the NFL, these are things and concerns that they talk about among themselves all the time. Like, none of this is new information. None of this is surprising. All of this is very believable. It's just a matter now of, does the league fight this? Because I know the NFL does not want a discovery process. I know that they don't want to keep this in the headlines, particularly as we're coming up on the Super Bowl. So I'm just wondering what their response to this will ultimately be, especially as it relates to Stephen Ross, because the banner headline is the NFL's racist. The second headline is you have an owner trying to tank. Very curious what happens now.
Jemele, do you think that the Rooney Rule, while well-intentioned, is beneficial or hurtful in that it leads probably to more of these sham interviews?
Well, I guess it's a little bit of both. And the Rooney Rule and just the way this process goes, a lot of Black people watching this situation, regardless of whether or not you're a football fan or not, we can relate to what this is. I mean, because many of us have been on these kinds of interviews before where we know that we're getting this interview because they're checking a box. And what you're hoping is that in that process that is a sham, that maybe you will open their eyes up to considering either you or someone who looks like you. And while it is humiliating, as Brian Flores described on CNN this morning, it's the unfortunate condition that people of color and Black people specifically have been left with. And while I know, as you said, that the Rooney Rule, the intent was to widen the pool and to get ownership to considering other candidates, the other side of it is that they then just begin to use the Rooney Rule to frankly put Black coaches in a very degrading position of having to beg basically to be considered for jobs that they knew they were qualified for, and in some cases overqualified for.
What's going to happen to Brian Flores going forward here?
He's going to get the Colin Kaepernick treatment. I mean, I think we all know. I hope I'm wrong, but I would be shocked if he was ever a head coach again. I mean, I could certainly see him being an assistant. I could certainly, see him maintaining some role with the NFL, but I'd be pretty surprised if he was giving a head coaching position. We know from Colin Kaepernick how resentful, vengeful, petty, and vindictive that NFL owners are, particularly when they feel like you have put them on the spot, brought them bad PR. And so I expect the full response to be that Brian Flores has ended his coaching career.
Wouldn't that feed right into what Brian Flores is saying, though, Jemele?
Oh, it would. And I think that's part of the brilliance of what he did, is that he probably will become the example, in addition to the claims that he stated in his lawsuit. And by the way, shout out to him for using my recent column with The Atlantic as evidence of the racism in the league.
It felt to me, actually, Jemele, like they slapped this as we were talking this through and thinking that this might have been thrown together 58 pages in the last week, the moment that Flores got hurt by Bill Belichick, his mentor, making that particular mistake. It feels like that was slapped, like they almost did. A bunch of lawyers got a research project together and like, let's go get what Jemele wrote over here. Here's how we start the argument of we're going to take to court that the plantation mentality is systemic, where the racism is in the conservative NFL. They're not going after the Dolphins here. I think they're going after the institution of systemic racism that has plagued sports the entire time you've been covering it, long before that.
Yeah, I mean, because that column I wrote for The Atlantic is only like the 50th version of that column that I've done basically the last 5 or 6 years. So, and that's the thing, like his lawyers, you mentioned, like they put together the research project. This had to be the easiest research project they've ever put together because the evidence is so blatant and it's been written about and discussed so frequently and just so often. So, I do think that it will, we were talking about whether or not he coaches again. It's just the NFL, how they are and how they respond to these things. And especially now that Brian Flores has really done something that they can't stand. He's already hijacked the Super Bowl. He's already hijacked it, right? So as soon as, Roger Goodell does an annual press conference at the Super Bowl with the media, 99% of the questions are going to be about this. And that is going to piss the NFL owners off in a way that is going to be very similar to what Colin Kaepernick has experienced.
Couldn't I make a pretty convincing argument, Jemele, that however uncomfortable it is, Brian Flores knocking the retirement of Tom Brady, the greatest winner ever, out of the news cycle, is the media enjoying feeding on this, but also represents progress. It's how the movement gathers momentum. I'm surprised that a story has landed with the Dolphins, with Brian Flores, with anything that can knock that story off to the side.
Yeah, and I agree because I think especially given the kinds of conversations that have been going on in this country the last now 2 years, that it is an appropriate moment for this to happen. And I'm sure on some level, I don't know Brian Flores, but I'm sure on some level he felt that particular momentum. And while I joked about him dropping this on Black History Month, I do think that was part of the significance of doing this now. And what I'm really curious about is to see which coaches join him in this fight, because so many of them have experienced what he's gone through, but obviously many of them want to coach in the league and want to try to one day become a head coach. But I really hope that the other coaches who have experienced what he have and who have been victimized by the systemic racism in the NFL, I hope that they join him. Because the one thing I think was a mistake, the players not joining Colin Kaepernick, regardless if you agree with the method of protest, you knew what he was talking about was real. And you knew the issues he spoke to were real. And a big mistake they made is that they did not join him. I'm not talking about necessarily taking a knee, but they didn't vocally form a wall around him. And I hope NFL coaches, Black NFL coaches, and white NFL coaches, I hope they form a wall around Brian Flores, because that is the only way that they're going to see the systemic change that needs to happen in this league.
Jemele, do you have a texting the wrong person story? Because I was telling the crew here that once my wife told me to get a foot massage, and her name is Abby, and I finally went to get one in New York City, and I meant to text her, hey, you were right about the foot massage. It's better than sex. I sent it to Alden Smith by mistake. Look at her face.
I'm sure he was just like, wow, I didn't realize our friendship had progressed to that level.
Still hasn't responded. Yeah, still hasn't responded.
Still hasn't? No. All right.
No,
so you don't know where he stands about this foot massage. I am very fortunate. I do not have that kind of story. However, I do have funny stories about people accidentally texting me. Okay. All right. Where I've gotten some unfortunate texts and I'm like, I'm pretty sure you didn't mean this graphic thing you just sent to send it
name names.
To me, especially if you've been in the situation before where you have a number that belonged to somebody else, right? And that then you wind up getting some stuff. You guys will find this funny, given our shared history at ESPN. So when I was going through all my drama with the whole Trump thing, I had changed my number to a Connecticut number, a Bristol number, like a few years ago. And one of the senior executives at ESPN, after all this trouble, was going down or whatever, did not realize I had changed my number. So to my old number, he sent something asking about, was I going to give a quote or something? It was related to how I was going to address the Trump situation. And he got cussed out. Now, I don't, because it was an old number. And so I see him and he's like, hey, just want to be sure, are we okay? And I was like, what are you talking about?
Oh no.
I was like, yeah, we're good. Like, what are you talking about? He was like, well, I was just a little concerned because you used some pretty rough language with me.
It's somebody who was it somebody tired of getting all your texts?
Yes,
is that what was happening?
Was. Yes, because their phone, I was like, yo, whoever had that former 517 number, dude, I'm sorry. Like, So when the Trump thing went down,
That person is
you
hearing
were
from
probably
every CNN producer,
Oh
everyone,
my
because
God.
you're in the center of the
Yes.
storm, and like that person is getting all the texts on people reaching out to Jemele to see if she's okay, if she can talk about this, because you're in the middle of a culture war. Oh, that poor person.
And look, and you never know if your number has been given out to some people who maybe didn't agree with what I said. So he may have been getting some hate calls, some hate texts, some threats.
Mike,
I don't know.
do me a favor,
But-
Mike. Grab Jemele's old number from her off air, and let's call that person and
Yes.
just interview
Oh.
that
We
person
have
about
to.
how terrible it was to get all of Jemele's texts. Maybe introduce them. Maybe Jemele can offer a formal apology.
I've been on a group text with Jamele's current number, her old number, and myself, and this person seems to really revel in the fact that they used to have Jamele's old number.
And Jemele, I'm telling you, that person is probably also getting texts, with from your crew that talks about the, glazed donut and all the nicknames.
Oh no! They got my number. That's too sensitive. That's too sensitive.
You inform them of the change,
Okay,
right?
fair
Oh
enough.
yeah. Yes, that's too sensitive.
What was the stuff that you were looking at in the lawsuit that jumped out at you? I mean, we've mentioned obviously the bribe to lose, but I thought one of the things that was interesting is putting the idea of plantation on trial, because Jemele, in the years that you've been talking about this, that one's loaded. People don't talk. They just argue about whether it's a plantation or not, or whether you can make millions of dollars and be a slave, even though James Baldwin says a highly paid slave is still a slave. So they argue
Right.
around that word, but it feels like this is going to be put on trial now.
Yeah, I mean, I think making that comparison was very jarring, eye-opening, and also very appropriate. And one of the columns that I've written about, and I addressed it in the last one, and certainly I hit it probably more strongly in the column I did about, again, the same issue last year, was that there is, for people who are not, maybe don't fully grasp what that means by like a plantation mentality. The plantation mentality is that Black men are fine as laborers, but never as leaders. And we used to have this same discussion when it came to Black quarterbacks. Part of the reason why there was once a dearth of Black quarterbacks in the NFL is because the quarterback position was considered to be a thinking man's position, that this is a leadership position. This is a face of the franchise position. And Black men are not equipped to be in that role. And I think that mentality has clearly translated to coaching, to head coaching in particular. It's why I cringe many times when that genius label is constantly thrown around to, frankly, usually white coaches, right? Particularly on the offensive side of the football, where they're lauded for their intellect, for their scheme calling, for their play calling. But when it comes to Black coaches, the number one thing you hear about them, they're a player's coach. And that is just, even though a lot of times when it's said, it's not meant to be an insult, but it is insulting, because that's basically saying the only reason that you are having success in this position is because you're Black and they're Black, they being the players. You guys relate, whatever that means. That, oh yeah, they're playing for you because you're Black and y'all identify. We've been, obviously the Dolphins are at the center of this story. It was when not too long ago, when Mike Tomlin, before he got hired with the Pittsburgh Steelers, when, as you know, Dan, the Dolphins interviewed him, and supposedly a team executive said they didn't want Mike Tomlin because he's too hip hop. Like, what does that mean? I mean, instead of calling plays, is he shouting Biggie lyrics? Like, what is this? Right? You know what I'm saying? So that's a recent thing that happened, but it's an attitude that's prevalent in the NFL. And while some people may not outwardly, say certain things, it's in the back of their mind that there's a lot of doubt, a lot of, negative stereotypes that they still carry that impacts how they hire.
Mike Ryan, you should be proud that accomplished journalist and thorough researcher Jemele Hill has the information that was broken as news exclusively by Mike Ryan. Mike Ryan exclusive. He was there when that hip hop comment was uttered. There's not an allegedly.
Is that right?
He's the breaker.
He didn't want to produce that show.
Mike Ryan is the breaker of that story. He is the owner of that story. And not only that, Jemele, it's worse than that. It's a guy who became CEO because he was the headhunter in charge of finding the next CEO. And then you get the art of look at what the Dolphins have done over those 15 years and look at what Mike Tomlin has done over those 15 years.
And now look at them now at being the centerpiece of this tremendous watershed moment in the NFL.
Yeah, the same franchise that asked if Des Bryant's mom was a prostitute.
Yes.
Yeah, they really swing for the fences.
I mean, it really is. That's the only thing the Dolphins. It used to be. We're old enough, Jemele, to remember winningest franchise in the history of sports. Like that was the winningest team in Miami, and you got to be kidding me. They're just nothing but shame stories for 20 years.
And now we got assistant coaches doing cocaine.
Oh, that one too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was man.
Rest easy knowing that Mike Tomlin to hip hop line isn't just hearsay. I am just a text away from you and your old cell phone number.
Right.
Stugotz has a football question he's dying to ask you.
Well, I am. Jemele, I'm wondering, is tanking so bad if you're tanking for Joe Burrow or Tom Brady? And let's be honest.
I am one who, given the situation, or depending on the situation, like I'm sort of pro tanking. So while I understand it is from a competitive standpoint why it's wrong in the league, like why they can't have that. However, that being said, as a Pistons fan, I'm praying to God they continue to lose. Like, please lose as many games as possible. Stop trying so we can get the number one pick all over again. So from a strategy standpoint, you look at Joe Burrow. I mean, if he wound up, let's just say Brian Flores decided I'm going to do it. I'm going to do what Stephen Ross said, assuming this is true.
He'd still be
and
their
he wound up
coach.
with Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
I mean,
how mad is Miami about that?
in the macro sense, I agree. Look, the Browns went from 1 win in 2 seasons to making the playoffs and winning at Pittsburgh. It has its benefits. The NFL rewards losing. However,
right.
I cease being on board with tanking when I'm on Dolphins plus 13.5.
The gambling element of this is a big one, Jemele. Like there are so many things bouncing against the NFL and the NFL's alleged moralities. The gambling thing is, I thought we were talking about which is the actual bigger story today, given, Jemele, that this institutional racism Brian Flores is shedding a light on is something that's been around for a really long time. But the detail of owner trying to bribe coach to lose, that's not a detail we get very often.
No, that is added a bit of a wrinkle to this story. And look, Brian Flores must be one of the most principled men in America, because let somebody offer me $100,000 per game to lose. What? And he said no.
But Jemele, Stephen Ross probably wipes his butt with $100,000 bills. Do they even make bills that high? I mean, it's not a lot of money for him, right? Like, you have to hold out for more if you're
especially
Brian
as someone who hasn't paid taxes since whenever it is 2000.
Right?
Paid a dollar of taxes since it's been more than a decade.
But we're also.
So you think he should have negotiated?
Yeah.
Like he should have got it up there.
I thought Ross came in cheap. If you're going to ask somebody to sell out on their dignity that much, hey, don't like basically it's Marcellus talking to Bruce Willis in Pulp Fiction. That's your pride talking. Don't let it talk. Here's an amount of money to dump games.
But it's not even just about his integrity. It's about his actual record. When the Dolphins began their smear campaign, they began with Brian Flores, 25-27, as head coach of the Dolphins, when they were literally going to pay him to win. And in subsequent hires, his record is going to be held against him. Or pay him to lose, excuse me. And if he lost on purpose because the owner asked him to, that affects his future ability to get hired in other places.
But had he lost on purpose and gotten Joe Burrow, he'd still be the head coach.
He wouldn't have
likelihood.
lost. He wouldn't have lost. Yes. He'd be the shining jewel in the Belichick rotten tree.
Yeah, well, and then on top of that, you guys have seen the track record. Like most black coaches. And this would have been the dicey part for Flores. And maybe this is part of why he didn't do it, in addition to it being, competitively wrong, is that black coaches are generally judged much harsher than white coaches. And if you're him, you take, it's not out of the realm of possibility you get fired and the next head coach, probably a white dude, gets Joe Burrow. Why
Jim
you
Harbaugh.
like, thank
Brian
you.
Harbaugh gets him.
Well, exactly. I was
Exactly.
just gonna say, like, David Culley coming into the
I was like,
Texans job.
this is David Culley. I was
Right.
like, 100%.
You're not guaranteed
They're like,
to keep
yeah,
that
we don't have
job.
Deshaun Watson, J.J. Watt, or DeAndre Hopkins. Work with what you got. He wins as many games as Bill O'Brien. They even beat the number 1 seeded Titans during the regular season. And they're like, thanks for playing. You got us what we wanted. Bye. So, you know, it's a risk to do that, Dan. He may not still be here now if that was the case.
I have found a lot of elements of this fascinating. I don't know whether I can say this is loud noise of the moment or Kurt Flood, Jackie Robinson, Colin Kaepernick, name that's going to echo. He needs help here, Jemele. Is he going to get it?
You know, I am cautiously optimistic that he will, particularly maybe if you look at coaches who, like, I'm thinking of somebody like Jim Caldwell, for example. Jim Caldwell, older coach, seasoned, knows he probably won't get another head coaching opportunity, even though he's a name that he's interviewed in the last 2 cycles. If you're Jim Caldwell, this is the perfect fight for you to join, given your name, your reputation. I mean, for God's sake, he took the Lions to the playoffs twice in 4 years. They fired him after they were 9-7, okay? Which in Detroit, that's like being 16-1, all right? You're 9-7, all right? And he gets fired, hasn't gotten another head coaching opportunity. This to me feels like a fight that he can join. And I hope other coaches who are in the league and, you know, have felt these same emotions and have been through this kind of process, I hope they start, frankly, snitching on the NFL, because the thing about systemic racism and white supremacy, it depends on silence. And so now I think it is a really wonderful opportunity for them to join this fight, because there's strength in numbers. They can keep Brian Flores out the league. They can't keep all of you out. And so there's a huge opportunity here.
Did you notice and have any reaction to ESPN hiring Angela Rye, race, culture, and social justice correspondent? I feel like they had one of those.
I did have a reaction. My reaction, Angela is one of my good friends. And, you know, she is a wonderful, not on top of being a wonderful person, she's going to give them a dynamic that they sorely need. My hope, and I told Angela this because we had private conversations about it as she asked my opinion. And, you know, I gave her some thoughts as well as share some experiences that I had. They just need to let Angela Rye be Angela Rye. And if they do that, this will be a remarkable hire. The only way, and it won't be, you know, Angela will have nothing to do with this. The only way this could be a disappointment is if ESPN if they mess it up by, frankly, reverting back to some of the habits that we know that they have. So I'm happy for Angela. I think this is a tremendous hire for ESPN, but I pray they don't try to do to her what they've done to others. Hello, Dan LeBatard.
Hello, Jemele. You are a pioneer. Thank you for giving us the time. Know you're very busy today. We've got to find the person who has her old cell phone number. She's going to be on with us tomorrow.
I'm gonna text it to Mike.
She's also going to be on with us tomorrow to argue with Stan Van Gundy's horrible food takes. Like Jemele is going to blister him. Jemele, I need you to do a wrestling promo for what's coming for Stan Van Gundy tomorrow.
First of all, Stan is a communist. I love him, but like those food takes
Awful.
are so brutally bad.
Awful.
That I had no idea that beneath this wonderful, thoughtful man lays somebody who has the food taste of a 3-year-old. Like, what's happening here, Stan? We got to elevate you.
She's going to bury him tomorrow.
You leave that man alone. I love him.
Thank you, Jemele.
And his fluffy mustache.
Can't wait to create first take argument culture between Jemele and Stan Van Gundy. Thank you.
It's going down. All right, see you guys.
See ya.
Number of questions that we have from this lawsuit filed yesterday. Michael Willemin is a partner at Wigder LLP, and Brian Flores went to Michael. I want some timeline here. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate that you're here with us today. Can you just help me understand your client comes in when, with what kind of feelings, and makes this decision to try and shake the machine of the NFL?
Yes, thank you for having me. Our client interviewed with the Giants last Thursday, but 3 days prior to that, he had been told and informed by Mr. Belichick, mistakenly, that Mr. Dable had already received the position, that he was the Giants guy. And upon receiving that and realizing that he was going to be going in for a sham interview with the Giants, a token attempt to comply with the Rooney Rule, Mr. Flores reached out to our firm and we started gathering facts and information and doing research about the history of racism in the NFL when it comes to head coaching positions, when it comes to general manager, front office positions, coordinator positions, et cetera. So we had that in the works, started drafting the complaint. Mr. Flores obviously did go through with the interview on Thursday in the hopes that, as he said this morning, he believes that people, he wants to give them the benefit of the doubt. And so he went through the interview on Thursday, but once Mr. Dable was announced and Mr. Flores had given due consideration, we decided to move forward with the complaint.
The 57-page document that represents the initial stages of this lawsuit, the 10 days of research or however long it has been, doesn't feel like proof in a court of law. It feels like allegations. The proof's coming, you believe, though, right? The proof comes from others, and the Belichick texts can be suspicious. They are not proof of plantation mentality and systemic racism. So how do you go about proving it now?
Well, what I'll say is this. There is more proof coming. That's for certain. That's what we believe in discovery. We're going to be taking depositions, cross-examining owners and witnesses and decision makers with respect to these decisions that have historically been made in a way that we view as to be discriminatory. But the evidence is also already there. The evidence is in the numbers. The evidence is in comparisons with respect to hires of qualified Black coaches who don't get jobs in favor of white coaches. The evidence is there with respect to Black coaches being on a shorter lease, receiving less time in terms of tenure at jobs, being fired after winning seasons, and not being given the second chances that white coaches have been given over time. So when you talk about proof, there is, of course, the concept of the smoking gun. And while Mr. Belichick's text may not be dispositive of the entire racially discriminatory construct of the NFL when it comes to these decisions, it is a smoking gun with respect to equal opportunity for individuals of color with these head coaching jobs. Because regardless of the greater scheme of discrimination in the NFL, what you have is a situation where an extremely qualified Black head coach did not get even a fair shake.
So, Michael, just to be clear, if there is no Belichick text, we're not here today?
That's a difficult question to answer. I think we would be here someday. Whether we're here today, whether it would be in a month from now, it should have been years ago when you look at the numbers and you look at some of the admissions that the NFL has made. You have people like Troy Vincent and Jonathan Bean, executives at the NFL, acknowledging a double standard when it comes to Black coaches, acknowledging that it's the NFL's fault. So would we be here today? I mean, I don't want to rewrite history. I can tell you that certainly impacted Mr. Flores on a level that is really difficult to understand. And knowing that you're sitting at a dinner with the GM and going to an interview, knowing that you're not going to get the job and knowing that the reason you're there is only in a sort of a fake compliance with a rule because of the color of your skin, that's really powerful.
Is the Belichick text in the lawsuit because Flores was hurt by it, because Flores thinks it's proof, or both?
Well, I would say more of a latter. I mean, it's proof. Look, Mr. Flores had a long relationship with Mr. Belichick. Mr. Flores is not alleging in this lawsuit anything negatively with respect to Mr. Belichick. He's not going after Mr. Belichick in any way. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, he's got to prove his case. And the text message establishes that a decision was made before an interview of Mr. Flores was even given, that a fair, equal opportunity was not provided. And it bears noting also that in the lawsuit, we reference various other individuals who apparently knew that the decision was made prior to Mr. Flores' interview. There were tweets by Jimmy Randazzo. There were also statements by Boomer Esiason during one of his CBS Sports Minutes in which he said that earlier in the week, and of course our client had been interviewed only on Thursday, that the decision to hire Mr. Dable had been made. So that's the audacity of the situation, I think also highlights how bad this is.
Your dream scenario for your client looks like what?
Well, his dream scenario at this point is different than it would have been, probably a few weeks ago when he was hoping he was getting fair shakes in these interviews. Look, at this point, he wants to make change. He knows that he's taking an extraordinary risk with respect to his future coaching career. And he said over and over again, he loves coaching. But what he thinks is more important now is stepping forward and being the first face, hopefully, in a longer fight to achieve equality for Black coaches, GMs, front office people, and really ultimately ownership, which may very well be where this should start if we're going to really fix the problem.
What do the Stephen Ross details prove?
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple of things there. One, from a purely technical, compliance standpoint, with NFL rules and regulations, et cetera. I mean, you shouldn't be tanking games. You shouldn't be setting up interviews in violation with tampering rules. You certainly shouldn't be offering someone money to tank games. So that has an integrity of the game. It's an integrity of the game issue. Let's put it that way. That sort of stands on its own. But I think it also shows, over the period of Mr. Flores' tenure at the Dolphins, that he was repeatedly asked to be placed into positions that were really unethical, that were a violation of league rules, that were the antithesis of everything that Mr. Flores has come to learn and love about the game of football. And according to the complaint, Mr. Ross expected Mr. Flores to just be a yes man. And when he refused to do that, he was labeled as difficult to work with. He was labeled as combative, as not collaborative. And ultimately, despite turning around an organization that everyone understood was in complete shambles when he took the job, he gets fired after 2 winning seasons, the first of its kind for the Dolphins in almost 2 decades. So there's a number of different angles there.
But is that racism?
It certainly is. I mean, when you expect a situation where Mr. Ross was in, expects Mr. Flores, a Black man, to acquiesce to his requests, which are really completely improper.
Well, they are improper, but they would have been improper if they had been filed on a white coach too, and we don't know that they'd been done to a white coach. The question I'm asking you is, I know that it's inappropriate and it's meant to embarrass Stephen Ross, but does it prove your claim that Stephen Ross acted in a way that was systemically racist, that he wouldn't have done that with a coach who wasn't Black?
What demonstrates to us that race played a role in this is the way that the Dolphins began characterizing Mr. Flores after he refused these requests. And there is a long, horrible history of Black men who are not agreeable being labeled as not collaborative, as being labeled as abrasive, or being labeled as argumentative. And I'm very excited to get into discovery in this case and find out how many white coaches across the league have engaged in conduct that would be otherwise considered non-collaborative or argumentative, and have not been portrayed that way in the media after their terminations. That to us is what points to race here.
I've got a number of different questions. The Belichick release, how worried was your client about the relationship with Belichick, embarrassing Belichick that way?
I think he hopes that it will not damage, and maybe this is a hope to be, maybe it's too much to hope for. But at the end of the day, while Mr. Belichick made a mistake in texting Mr. Flores, at the end of the day, what happened was a good thing, because it exposed a situation where there was a lack of equal opportunity for an individual who was a qualified Black coach to have a chance at a job. And I think that Mr. Belichick, he's in a position right now where he can do one of two things. He can be upset, angry. He can diminish his relationship or end it with Mr. Flores, or he could do the right thing and come out and say, yeah, this is something that we knew. And whether in retrospect or whether at the time I was aware of it, this is something that's not right, because we have rules in place, and they shouldn't even need to be in place. But we have rules in place that are designed to give Black coaches a fair shake and a fair opportunity. And this was done directly in disregard of those rules. And Mr. Belichick should embrace Mr. Flores' desire for change.
Michael, have you heard from any other coaches who have called you and said, hey, we want to stand with Brian Flores?
we've heard, without getting specific in terms of positions or what have you, I mean, we've heard from a lot of people, both within the NFL and outside of the NFL, former and current, people who were there. I suspect that this case will grow. It is obviously, this, as I noted before, this case could have been brought 100 times over in the last number of decades. It's difficult to do it. Mr. Flores has mustered the courage to do it. He's put his career on the line. And I think that when people see that, and we see this in other cases too, the Weinstein case is a good example, where one person comes out and the waterfall starts flowing. So while I can't get into specific conversations I've had with people or we've had with people, I suspect we'll see an enlargement of this case in the days and weeks to come.
Purposeful or not, doing it on the first day of Black History Month?
Sometimes things just fall into place. The timing worked. It wasn't lost on us, obviously, right? I mean, the very beginning of the complaint notes that. And this was done in large part to honor the struggles. Put aside Black History Month for a minute. This lawsuit was brought in large part to honor the struggles of men and women of color who over the years have stood up against, racist institutions and systemic discrimination. And so the fact that Mr. Flores was doing it, in his own way to stand up against systemic discrimination in the NFL was not lost on him. And that's why, we wanted to make very clear that it was very important to Mr. Flores that this be done in Black History Month. At the same time, if all this had happened in March, he wouldn't have waited 9 months to file his lawsuit, right? So there's a bit of serendipity in that as well.
Michael, I know this is serious, and we appreciate you joining us. I'm just wondering, any part laugh at Belichick texting the wrong Brian?
It is, look, anyone reading the text message, and I've watched obviously a lot of the coverage over the last couple of days. I've watched former players, current players, I've watched coaches, I've watched media analysts, et cetera, et cetera. I've seen a lot of people give a chuckle to that. Look, we're human beings. You have to chuckle, I think, especially with respect to Mr. Belichick's last text when he realized he had gotten it wrong.
He gave you a chuckle, Stugotz.
All right.
Congratulations. You got a chuckle. He didn't give you the actual chuckle. He just articulated the words around the feeling of a chuckle. It was indeed chuckle worthy. The idea that you would find in the middle of your lawsuit the one detail that you can throw the audience that would make sure that they would feed on all of this story, because it's an unbelievable detail to have in your story that the champion coach knew somehow before Brian Flores did that his pupil was going into a sham interview. That I can't imagine what you're thinking about being able to depose that man. It's going to be very difficult, sir. You have never met this challenge in your life.
You don't think he'll be giving us lengthy answers with respect to
I don't care how good you are. I don't care what army of lawyers you have. You are in for the fight of your life getting anything interesting out of that man.
Ask him about punters first. He'll really open up.
Yeah, so we look forward to that opportunity, difficult as it may be. I think we'll meet the challenge.
Thank you, sir.
I hope we see you again.
Has anyone told you we're on to Cincinnati as an answer while they're being
trash
deposed?
talk right there. You are going to meet the challenge. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me on. Good day, everyone.
Thank you, Michael.
There was some funny stuff in that lawsuit, some heartbreaking stuff in that lawsuit. Felt to me like a research paper lawyers put together in the last 10 days. And now the argument's going to be made by people who have receipts who gather around. Was fascinating to see Brian Flores become a freedom fighter on the spot, right? Because he can.
Yeah. Like, I think one thing about that lawsuit is I felt like it was 40 pages of, you know how they do, right? Like, it got to the end. And I want to know who in the office put that together for him. If they got some like aggrieved black dude whose job it is to be like, yo, man, how they do? I'm going to tell you how they do. And then just rattled off 40 pages worth of this is how they do. My first read when I saw this, because I don't think this case is a winner, like at least in court a winner, was he must be mad. That thing with the Giants happened last week. He went and got the lawyers and got the suit and was ready to set fire to his whole career in a span of 1 week. And I have no choice other than to believe him when he says that he's just standing up for what's right. Because otherwise, this is stupid. Like the only reason to do this in the way that he's doing it is because you think you got a principle to stand on.
Is he mad or hurt or both? Because the Belichick thing, that one, I read it and thought it was funny, and my heart broke for him because that must suck. He's being so respectful to Belichick. They're calling him Bill in the text, and what you get back is, oh, no, I know the other guy's got the job. Like, I just thought, maybe the anger is birthed by the hurt, but I thought this dude got hurt in here.
Well, I don't think there's any gripe to have with Bill Belichick about this. Like, Belichick's not the one who did this. He's just the one that happened to be trafficking in the information. Honestly, I felt really bad for Bill Belichick. He thought he was sending that text to one Brian who used to work for him, and instead he was sending it to the other Brian who worked for him. And it doesn't sound like Belichick had any idea that the Giants were trying to engage in this alleged ruse when it came to Flores, right? Like, imagine being Belichick and you get that reply that's like, yeah, I'm interviewing next week. And he's like, you're not interviewing next week. You already, rut-row, all bad, abort mission.
Could have been Brian Hoyer. I mean, imagine that.
That he wishes it was Brian Hoyer so bad. Like, that's the most relatable Bill Belichick has ever been, is sending the text to the wrong person. And the text that you sent to the wrong person is the exact wrong text to send to that wrong person.
Can you help me please understand Stephen Ross, all of it? Allegedly progressive, but has a whole lot of stuff here, Bo. I cannot remember an owner buffooning his way through some of the things the Dolphins have buffooned themselves through in the last 15 years. It's just apocalypse after apocalypse.
Well, first thing, and maybe I missed it in the paperwork, but I did not recall seeing Flores say what is, I guess, kind of implicit in the Stephen Ross offer to get 100 G's for every game that you lose. He hired the black dude to lose. And this is a theme that the NFL has. I can list you some more. David Culley in Houston was hired to lose. Raheem Morris in Tampa Bay was probably hired to lose. And they messed up and had like one good season and nobody knew what to do, which is kind of similar to what I think is going on with Flores, where he was like, I ain't coming down here to lose. But the idea that an owner went to a coach and said, I want you to lose games could cost Stephen Ross his team. Like, I don't know if the other owners of the league can afford for them to show that dirt in their era of gambling, right? Like, the thing about gambling at the casino is nobody's trying to make sure the game is played straight harder than the casino, right? Like, they're the ones trying to prevent the fix. The NFL is now the casino in this regard. They have to make sure that the fix is not in. And Stephen Ross is basically saying, I want us to go out here and lose every game, and I will incentivize you to come out here and lose every game. And by the way, was then ultimately going to fire him for losing all those games, and then would say that the 100 G's per loss was the reason that they did it and you got paid handsomely for doing it. So yeah, this man might wind up losing his team. I also feel like he clearly did not do his background on Flores in hiring him. And I say that because he invites Flores on this yacht, allegedly, and says, hey, somebody's going to be here. And Flores is like, yo, I'm not here for this. And then Ross again set up something for him to wind up in the same room with Tom Brady. You would know when you hired this guy that he wasn't the dude to play around with this. If you really do all your due diligence and everything they claim they do, especially with players getting drafted and stuff like that, you wouldn't think that this is the guy to approach with this, which makes me think he was hiring a coach that he wanted to be a loser.
Do you find interesting at all that the flames climbing up into the Donald Sterling area that get around the commissioner will have nothing to do with the race stuff we're talking about? Nothing. It can only be the gambling stuff. None of this other stuff would climb around the commissioner. Only the $100,000 for purposely losing is the thing that I think puts in the conversation. Wait a minute. He might lose his team? Because I don't think he might lose his team. I think they're still protected there. These people know how to protect their own.
He has a measure of protection. I do think that's fair, but he did something they couldn't do. They didn't protect Jerry Richardson when it came down, and it was just like, oh, this is too much, right? You out here shaving their legs at the office, too far. Now you have to go. I'm not certain that Ross is like ultimately going to be protected on that front, but I do imagine John Gruden sitting around like, put it all out there. Let's hear it. Don't nobody want to get to the bottom of what's going on here quite like John Gruden.
So
It ain't just
John
me.
Gruden, like, I thought it was just me. I thought y'all said I was the one. Oh, okay. Let's see what else we got here. Let's go hear what John Elway has to say about this. And Elway is one of these dudes where he did hire Vance Joseph, and I don't think he fired Vance Joseph too early. Like, it sounded like Joseph was overwhelmed in that job and they needed to move, although he went and hired somebody that was no better than Vance Joseph and gave that guy 4 years instead of the 2 years that he gave Vance Joseph. But the idea that John Elway didn't even bother to pretend, just showed up to that meeting 3 sheets to the wind with Flores, knowing damn well he wasn't going to give him the job, that's damning. And it's more damning because he had just hired Vance Joseph the last cycle because he was basically saying, nope, tried that. Not again.
So I know the timeline is the Dolphins allegedly wanted to tank. That plan didn't work out. So they hired this guy to be a loser, but then they tried to put him in the same room with Tom Brady. They tried to, but that doesn't match. Like,
You're trying to win.
Saddling a coach with Tom Brady isn't a losing maneuver.
We're tanking for Burrow.
But if the losing plan in 2019 was so that we can get a quarterback and you have messed up the go get a quarterback plan, then let's go to plan B on getting a quarterback, which is try to get Tom Brady, and then went to plan C, which hilariously was plan A, draft Tua, right? This whole thing started on the Tank for Tua program, and then Tua wasn't what they thought it was. They actually eventually got what everybody thought they wanted, and then they didn't want it.
Right. They did offer, reportedly, they did offer the Bengals like 3 first-round picks, and the Bengals famously didn't even pick up the phone call or hung up right away because through their evaluation process, they realized Joe Burrow was a superior prospect. But I understand hiring him
But I think it's even past the evaluation. I think the evaluation indicated that he was a superior prospect, and also that dude was local. Like,
right.
Joe Burrow was the guy for that team to take. Like, he's not from the Cincinnati area, but Ohio's close enough.
Right. But is it fair to say he hired him to be a loser initially? But
yes.
Hiring him to be a loser for the entire time in Miami was certainly not in the plans if he's trying to get him that franchise quarterback, be it Joe Burrow or Tom Brady.
Correct. Yeah, no, but they definitely, the plan was for them to lose all the games to start. And then when he actually demonstrated that he could win 5 games with that collection of bums that they had, then they expected to actually win. Like that, you can't have that team they had in 2019 and think that this franchise is really going to be a winner in 2021 unless you think Brian Flores is an excellent coach. And I don't even know if that's true for what it's worth.
Bo, do you think other coaches and players will rally around Brian Flores here?
Maybe some players, not a coach. Not a single one.
Not
White
a
folks
single
don't care.
coach?
No, the white folks don't care and the black folks don't have leverage. Like, I mean, the thought that when this happened with Flores, a whole lot of people, myself included, and probably some of y'all, the immediate thought was, dog, have you lost your mind? But then he said, yeah, no, I might not ever get a coaching job again. Okay, hey, man, long as you know. And so never forget what Gene Upshaw said about running the union, where people feel like the Players Association is not confrontational enough. And Upshaw is like, hey, man, I took on that fight. He's talking about, I guess, 1987 in particular. But he's like, I took on that fight. I went up that hill. And when I turned around, I was by myself, right? So his game was, I'm just going to try to make as much of this money as I possibly can. I don't know how many black coaches are going to be willing to put their careers on the line at this point for him. I just don't know. And if he's willing to take this fight on for himself, bless his heart. But if he thinks he's about to have a bunch of people behind him, I don't think that's going to go like he thinks.
That's interesting you say that, Bo, because you say that as presented, the case is a loser. And there isn't very much that resembles proof in what we read that you could prove racism in a court of law. That is a loser. But I thought that that was just thrown out there to bring the others. I thought that there are all sorts of people out there who are going to have similar receipts and similar hurt, similar bitterness, and similar shame in those sham interviews that test your dignity. Bo, you know that button is the one that gets pressed. Dignity. Yes. Like, you're putting me in that interview and you're drunk, or you're putting me in that interview and this is a show when I just did what I did with the Dolphins. Like, that shit hurts.
Yeah, but there's a reason why you ain't heard from them cats by now, right? You know, like that's the thing. There's a reason why we haven't heard from them right now. So there may be some people that join him. I don't know. I would like ostensibly hope ultimately that they would, but I just don't know how many people are willing to come out here and stand on it at this point. And it doesn't help also one problem we got with the way we report about this and we talk about it is we can only talk about one black dude at a time, right? That's how we keep on talking about Eric Bieniemy over and over and over again. None of us have any idea if Eric Bieniemy actually has any business being a head coach, but that's the one guy we pull out. So who are the names that could come out and talk about this and that the public would view credibly and think that they ever had a chance at being a head coach in the first place? And this is where the NFL has rigged the game so well. They'll entertain the possibility at all of these guys ever getting jobs. And so somebody pops up and is like, yo, I ain't never got no job. And they're like, yeah, they was never going to give you a job. But it's like, who gets jobs? Great question. We don't actually have a system for the way that these things ultimately go. And so I don't know. Like all of it, I look at it from top to bottom. I do know this, though. If somebody gets him to come around, it ain't going to be Brian Flores. It's going to be them fancy pants New York lawyers that he's got. And that's the part that I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. Colin Kaepernick got L.A. lawyers. He went and got Hollywood lawyers. This dude went and got New York lawyers, right? He's a New York prep school kid. I bet he's got a network and a phone book that will blow your mind. He got New York lawyers who aren't here to negotiate some deal. They here to fight.
Oh, I don't think this ends in a settlement, right? I think that what Flores just did was seismic enough to make me feel like there ain't an amount of money. There's not an amount of money. Now, maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe they settle because it goes years and gets caught in the court system. But once you go down this path where you're willing to torch you know how these football guys are, Bo. Like, he's torching everything he's ever cared about on the idea of, no, I can prove racism. I'm going to be able to prove this in a court.
Well, what I want to know is, what do his lawyers think of this? Because apparently they must think this is some sort of winner, or at the very least, they think they can get a shakedown out of it in the end. I don't know. But like I say, he didn't get a dude, what's my man's name in here, of Salino and Barnes, or whoever they are that be on these commercials up here.
888-888-8888.
There we go. That's him. He didn't go to Houston and call Jim Adler the Texas Hammer. I don't remember who the TV lawyer is in Miami, but you know who it is. It's the guy you call. In fact, there is one guy in Miami he could have called that would have made me be like, oh, he ain't playing no games. What's my man's name? No, Jorge
Alex Hanna.
No, it's Jorge Baez. Is that
Rubenstein.
Amajar and Levine.
Yeah, the one I forgot about
Barry Cohen.
No, the one that represented Casey Anthony. Was that Jorge Baez?
I'm sorry that we're not.
411 Payne.
I'm not sorry. We've got so many of those in Miami, Bo.
I forgot. No, see, I forgot the city, and I forgot who I was talking to. But he's playing to win here. I suppose he was on CBS this morning doing this. I don't know what his wife thinks about this, right? Like, he is 40 years old and was like, I'm burning the whole thing down, even if it burns me in the process. And you got to respect it. There's no way around it. You got to respect it.
It is Jose Baez. And the thing you say, got to respect it, but you know what's going to happen now, right? Goalposts are going to move. People are going to argue what is and isn't racist. They're going to put on trial the plantation mentality of sports is where they're headed with this research paper that they're saying is a lawsuit. Bo, this was too quick. Like, there's nothing in there yet. They have to rely on others in order to make this a historic thing. You and I can believe in the principle and say it's courageous, but for it to echo and him to be a pioneer, he's got to get results with this, Bo. Yeah. It can't just be that he makes a loud noise at a time that, we want to talk about this stuff.
I disagree with that. I think that a loud noise can do it. I just don't know how loud the noise has to be to resonate for long enough in the course of this. But Colin Kaepernick ultimately was loud noise. And I do think that there was a resonant and impactful play out to the way all this goes. And maybe the thing with Flores was, as I think about it, when the Dolphins fired him, he was always prepared for a lawsuit. And then came this crazy thing with the Giants. And I think the most insulting thing to him had to be that they were telling him, well, what do you think about hiring Brian Daboll as your offensive coordinator? I think that he would be great to work with you. I hear he doesn't like working with McDermott. And then he looks up and Brian Daboll actually got the job. Keeping in mind that he has worked with Brian Daboll and might not think he's any good.
Bo, here's an idea that's unlikely to happen. But how about Bill Belichick staying with his former coach and friend, Brian Flores? How about that?
After he betrayed Bill Belichick and put his business in the street?
Yep.
Because my thing is this. I don't think he betrayed Belichick. Like, if I were Belichick, I wouldn't find this is something that I could not forgive, right? Like, how dare you do such a thing? But don't nobody want to work with the dude that's out here screen capping?
So your takeaway from that text exchange was that they were friends?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it would be the right thing to do. I mean, Belichick should stand with Brian
stand
Flores.
with his friend
Make
Brian
an impact.
Flores. That
Yes,
didn't
his
seem like
former
a
coach.
particularly close relationship, given the
Oh.
texts that we've seen.
What if they were
Well, to be
staged?
fair, at that point, what else is there for Bill Belichick to say? I applaud Bill Belichick for even replying.
Right.
When he was like, are you texting Brian Flores or Brian Daboll? That might have been the last text you. Bill Belichick has left the chat.
No, I'm telling you that if I'm Belichick and I realize my mistake, I call somebody younger than me over and say, how do I put it so that all that Flores gets back from me is eternal bubbles? That he doesn't know that I'm about to respond, but I haven't.
Auto-responds.
And so that I can make the excuse of, well, I thought I sent it, but I never sent it or whatever. I was
Dude.
surprised how honest he was. I was.
Such an easy mistake to make. Like, I don't know about you guys, but when I make the mistake of accidentally sending the text message to the wrong person, I'd be so heated that I put in the name of the person that I'm talking about in the send part. And then next thing you know, it's like, oh no, I was talking about you, not to. Oh, rut-row.
Yeah, that
This one was just the two Bryans came up at the top. And he just hit the wrong one.
Happened to me in 8th grade, Bomani.
Wow, they had cell phones when you were in 8th grade.
Yeah,
huh?
that's what we
8th
marveled
grade.
at.
She texted in
which
8th
she's
grade,
been
Bomani.
texting since
Yeah.
8th grade. Yes, we've been marveling
Very
at that. Are there other
Wow.
things?
Yeah.
Are there other things in the paperwork that were interesting to you?
Yeah, not really. I mean, the paperwork, the mere act is what was interesting. The paperwork itself is just kind of there, like when you really think about it. But the mere fact that this was something that he entertained doing just blows my mind. Like, they had me on SportsCenter. You know, I love doing SportsCenter at times like these because I like to hit him with Uncle Charlie, you know, throw him that deuce. And they're like, well, you know, what is your thought? And I'm like, he must be mad. Like, that's all I had on that. He is mad.
I know you like throwing the change up because you are coming out here and saying, well, I don't know if maybe Brian Flores wasn't a good coach. Maybe he was a mean man from the Patriot way. And maybe this isn't the greatest messenger for whatever the reasons are. The thing you can get behind, though, is the cause. Being so mad and tired, Bomani, that you're like, I'll set fire to everything here in order to try and be a pioneer here. The coaching Kaepernick.
Yeah. I mean, again, a guy who still had a bright future. Like, he's 40 years old. There is a lot left for him to potentially do. But also what I imagine made him mad too, and, you know, people have been hearing the winds of this, all that Patriot Way stuff and everything else. Okay, cool. What's the dude name down there in Houston? Caserio, the dude that was in New England, that's the general manager.
The pastor, the former pastor, the former team pastor.
Jack Easterby.
Oh,
no,
that was
that's
someone
Jack
else.
Easterby.
I'm sorry, my bad.
Yeah, that's Jack Easterby.
Nick Caserio.
Caserio's the general manager who went to college with Josh McDaniels. Like, it's all tied up in that stuff. But anyway, for all that talk about wanting to get the Patriot Way going down there, and they'd had O'Brien there before and everything else, the kooky owner apparently wants to hire Josh McCown, whom everyone loves, but has never been a head coach. And they want Flores to go down there? You know, like imagine that for you. So the Giants, your hometown team, do not forget, run the sham on you. People who supposedly know you seem to have wanted you to engage in a sham down there after their last hire was already a sham. You did a fairly decent job in Miami where the owner wanted you to lose on purpose and then get you out of here ultimately for not winning enough. I can't blame him for looking around and being like, yo, what's going on here? Denver, the guy shows up and clearly doesn't even want to hire you.
Bo, you think Brady's pissed today?
No, actually.
Really?
Because I don't think he cares. I think that he probably would have been cool just to retire and not tell anybody. Like, he's not the victory lap guy. So Mike Krzyzewski's going through his victory lap this year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, oh, man, you know, he must hate this. You must not know Mike Krzyzewski. Mike Krzyzewski's loving every minute of this. Roy Williams woke up one day and quit. Dean Smith woke up one day and quit, right? It just a quick move. Nobody thought about it again. Just kept it going. I think Brady's more in line with those guys.
What changes here Bo, what has to change? What can change? What won't change?
White people. Like, I just don't know why people try to make this far more complex than it is. What's the problem? White people. Now, not every single individual white person. No. But in the macro and the aggregate, who are the ones that are making these decisions? White people. Who are the ones that won't change their decision making? White people. Who are the ones that only do anything in a different way when it comes to these matters at the threat of litigation? White people. So I need to ask y'all, what is it that can change? Y'all the ones that know these white people. Y'all the ones that be hanging out with these white people. Y'all the ones that know the ones that pretend to be such good people and then make all the same decisions as everybody else. So I don't have that answer there. What I do know is this, and this is, I don't know how exactly, like I'm not, okay, this is how it goes. People in this country, I would say the median American, black, white, whatever, right, believes that black people are not as intelligent as white people, period, right? That's part of why people like get so hopped up about me, because they just can't believe that a black person like me actually exists in the state of nature. Come on, man. Think about this, Dan. Mina Kimes is probably every bit as bright as I am, and people don't act like they met a unicorn when they meet her in the way that they act like they met a unicorn when they met me. It's because they just don't think black people are that smart. Okay. If you're walking in the door with the initial presumption that black people just aren't that smart, I don't know how we're going to change your mind and make you think that the black person should wind up being the coach. You want the analog? Me and Dominique were talking about this last week. So Eric Weddle just came back out of retirement to play for the Rams. You may not know this, but in 2005, it may have been the Emerald Bowl or something. I don't know. But Eric Weddle was a junior at Utah playing corner, and they played against Georgia Tech, and he held Calvin Johnson to 2 catches for 19 yards in a bowl game. Eric Weddle was drafted to play safety. That's all I'm saying, because people don't believe that a white person is capable of doing that. And there was not going to be anything that he could show and achieve on the field as a cornerback that was going to make those white people believe that he could play corner. Dominique talks about us a dude named Dustin Fox who played for Ohio State. He was a corner at Ohio State. And Dominique, I was like, when he got drafted, like, was there a player that went before you that made you be like, okay, this is bullshit? And he said, yeah, it was Dustin Fox. And I was like, oh, okay, because the white dude got drafted ahead of you. But then Fox got wind of it. Dustin Fox got wind of it. It was like, don't worry, Dominique, they drafted me to play corner. Justin Fox said that the only people who believed that he could play corner, I mean, they play safety is what he said. He said the only people that believed that he could play corner were 3 dudes, and I can't remember who the third was, but the other 2 were Mike Tomlin and Mel Tucker. Because white people just don't believe that a white person can be fast. They do the same thing to their own in a different place. And so as long as white people just believe that black people ain't that smart, I just don't know how you're going to get the owner to feel good. You're going to otherwise wind up with people doing their Mike Mayock impressions. I don't know. It's just something in my gut. Remember he said that about Teddy Bridgewater and why he'd take Johnny Manziel or why he'd take Blaine Gabbert, I think it was, over Cam Newton. I don't know. It's just something in my gut. It's that white in your gut. Like when you start hearing that in those situations, it's that white in your gut. So how do we get that white out? I don't know.
Isn't that what happened with Polian and Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, it's a difficult concept for people to, I mean, quarterback is a great place for it, right? Like a great place to have that discussion. They just don't think that we are able to do these things. And so somebody gonna have to, there is a great line in a song called Trial Time where my man say, get you 12 white folks and take that shit to trial. Problem is you're getting 12 white folks, but they're gonna have to take it to trial. Otherwise it ain't going.
One of the things they're taking to trial is the loaded word plantation when it comes to sports.
They shouldn't have put that in there. They should not have put that in there. I mean, and you know who does that? Honestly, white people who don't understand that you got to know how to talk to white people, right? So like I'm working on this TV show that I'm doing for another network, right? And one thing I've had to explain to the writers is we ain't going to come out here really calling no individual person a racist. And Dan, you can even think about this in this over a decade that you've known me. You've heard me talk about things in general, but you'll have a hard time thinking about times that I pointed at this individual person being like, you are a racist. Because once you do that, the wheels come off. Like once you do that, white people turn this not into a discussion of whatever else you were talking about, but some litigation. Like you said, the Mr. the Goalpost movement. What is and is not racist And, well, he's just like everybody else, like everything that plays out. Once you start talking about plantations and slavery in front of white people, the guilt pop up and everything shuts down, right? So that's inflammatory, and maybe it gets some measure of attention, but it doesn't make white people stop and take pause and reevaluate everything. It makes them push everything away. Even a lot of black people, you don't compare anything to slavery because they can't conceptualize the idea of slavery or plantations as an economic system, rather than a judgment and indictment of the people who are actually running the plantation. So that's one of those where, yeah, you might be right, but I don't know how far right is going to get you here.
Oh, but you say New York lawyers, though, and I don't know the sensibilities of this group of lawyers. I do know that they had someone either hurt or angry who thought he had proof of racism, and they've constructed in very short order, Bomani, on the first day of Black History Month, the loud noise that you need to see if, okay, how many other whistleblowers are we, how do we turn this into a movement? But they did it with a research paper that passes for a lawsuit that a bunch of lawyers put together in 57 days that does not prove that Brian Flores is the victim of racism, even though we all know that Brian Flores, the system, is going to be racist against people like Brian Flores, but proving it is another thing entirely.
Yeah, I think the next filing is what's going to be important, because the question is going to come down to, can you get this to discovery? Right? Like, in the end, if they can get this to discovery, then they're cooking with gas. That's what John Gruden's playing for over there in his suit. It's like, can we get this to discovery, at which point they will pay him every dime for reasons that Brian Flores is helping to spell out. I don't feel like I see enough that will ultimately get to discovery, and I'm not sure that this is going to be the thing that makes everybody else jump up, because these are the lawyers that represented the Harvey Weinstein victims. So perhaps they believe that the playbook that worked over there is going to work over here, but they're going to find out that the labor force in football is far more docile than it is over there where they were, you know, and that was a sweeping national movement that was going on, you know. What I have to say, in fairness to the NFL, though, and this is where I don't want to say they get a bad rap in times like these, but there's something to be said for the sports media industry, which has very many of the same exact problems as the NFL when it comes to diversity and hiring. And then the high horsing that goes on over here, well, ain't nobody want to talk about what's going on at their own jobs when it comes to these matters. That's one that gets a little tricky for me on this.
Anything at the Super Bowl, not the player's responsibility, but black fists, anything that suggests that a movement comes behind this, and not just asking a whole lot of other black people to maybe risk their careers on something that they don't want to.
Well, I imagine them lawyers going to be down there acting bad. Like this is your time, right? Get out there and acting bad. And I don't know if there's like a Black Coaches Association or a listserv or whatever it is, you know, to get this going. What I want to know is this. I have a problem that I have with this process, and you hear some whispers about it, but nobody really says it out loud. John Wooten and the Fritz Pollard Alliance have too much power in this process. And I say this as somebody who has never talked to John Wooten and who has never talked to anybody associated with that alliance. But I know the game. I know how things work. And basically, white folks need one person to talk to in times like these, right? They don't want to hear from all of us. They like assign one dude to come in here and tell us everything that you need. And the Fritz Pollard Alliance became the organization, and John Wooten became the guy. And so when it's like, yo, we need to go hire some black coaches, they go get a list from him. Never mind the fact that they should know all the same people he knows, right? But they go and they get a list from him. No one person should be the gatekeeper in that way to ultimately decide who gets these jobs. I imagine there's some black people that you don't know of and you ain't heard about who got some beef with John Wooten, and they never wind up with their names on that list. It's possible that Eric Bieniemy don't get along with John Wooten, and he doesn't wind up getting in those places, right? I bring that up to say Brian Flores seems to have skipped the Fritz Pollard Alliance altogether to go straight to the lawyers, which to me speaks to an impotence of that organization when it comes to resolving the claims that black coaches have, right? I don't know this for fact, but why did Flores not go talk to that guy and instead went to the white lawyers to make this happen? I can only reasonably assume he had no faith in that guy, and that is something that I think that people need to explore.
But he might also be behaving emotionally, right? He might be making emotional decisions because he was smear campaigned. Bomani, that was ugly what happened with the Dolphins.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, when I want to be emotional about something that white people are tripping, I call black people. I don't call you. I think I did that one time and it almost ruined our relationship. That's the thing. So there's definitely an emotional component in this, but it is damning for that alliance. The idea that Brian Flores would not go to them in a time like this. But the reason is y'all are the NFL. And so when you talk about who's going to make the NFL change, we've allowed the NFL to get away with having its own in-house Black People Network. And then when things don't go right and John Wooten just shakes his head, quit your job. Something, right?
Bo, can the Dolphins today announce that Jim Harbaugh is going to be their next head coach? Today.
I don't know who that's. Forgot they don't have a coach yet. Like, when can they announce a coach?
Exactly.
This is where it gets really tricky. When can they announce the coach? Who can the coach be ultimately that they do, in fact, announce? Are they going to go hire that Patrick Graham dude, the defensive coordinator for the Giants?
I'm looking at them getting hit by Flores and Gruden, and it's kind of amazing, though. Like, you can't, like, the idea, you've been wanting these guys to get deposed for how long? Are we going to ever see anybody deposed?
They'll pay any amount of money in the world to not get deposed. Like, something I think that we need to talk about when it relates to the NFL owners and what's changed in whatever the time period is. So look at Jim Irsay, right? Jim Irsay is now a billionaire. Jim Irsay inherited this team from his father. His father was not a billionaire. Like, his father was not he wasn't a poor man, but NFL team owners were not filthy rich before. They were not the equivalent relative to inflation of the time to the billionaires that own teams now. They were rich enough to have power, but not so rich that they were impervious to what the world thought. These guys are different. These guys have never had to care about any of this stuff. And so when it comes down to like, oh man, we might get some depositions, the hell we will, them checks gonna get cut. Like, think about this. There were depositions in the Kaepernick case and we barely heard about any of them. Barely.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones is something you should all be listening to. Also, Bo, what do you want to tell people about your next project? Is there any information to share?
My next project is a television show on HBO called Game Theory. We will be telling you very soon when the premiere date is going to be. We have already started. We got writers on board. We've already started taping stuff. We're going to do our first test shoot this week. And this is probably the best way I can describe it, and it works with this audience. If you have ever listened to my podcast, we are basically trying to figure out how to take that vibe and put it on television. Right. So we're going to do kind of some of the deeper, like, smarter stuff, for lack of a better term, but we're going to do those things the way that I typically do those things. Right. We're going to find ways, like, if you have wanted to see me do something that was built around me, that is what this is going to be. This ain't going to be a matter of, oh man, we got this show and then we plug this person in, or man, we going to squeeze them with a co-host, figure out how to make it work. No. For the first time, they like, this is you. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. I just got back from a suit fitting, Dan, with a man that when I walked in, he got pictures of Denzel Washington from American Gangster because he made the suits for that, and a picture of Eddie Murphy wearing a $17,000 suit in a movie that didn't even get used in the scene. Like, I had been so happy with my tailor that I had before. These people be shitting on my man's work every day, dog. It's a whole nother world, man. It's a whole nother world.
Bo, if you need anything from me, just let me know. I'll be there for you, okay?
Oh, one thing to always remember, Stugotz.
What happened?
I always know there is something that you can do for me. It'll just be between me and you. Like, whatever it is that I need to call you in to do,
right.
Don't nobody else need to know about that.
All right. Our secret.
But I know you got it.
Yeah, I got you.
Excited to see what Bo cooks up. Thank you, Bomani. Always good seeing you.
All right, man. You guys be good.
See you, Bo.